dancers, look at my backdrop. I am so excited. I literally love anything that sparkles. So today I'm super happy. I mean, actually I'm always happy. That's one thing you'll learn about me. It's a great way to be. But I am totally in love with these backdrops at the moment. I just went and bought a whole heap of them, so I'm so excited to release more videos and obviously show you all my new backdrops. Now, today, more importantly, why I'm here is to give you tips on preparing for exams and competitions. So obviously you all know I've danced for a long time and I've done so many competitions, like from A to Z in Australia. I've done every comp, and the same with as well worldwide, Prix de Lausanne, Youth America Grand Prix, Genet, Lana Haynes, oh, so many. So basically I wanted to give you all of my tips in how I dealt with high pressure situations like that, and not to mention as well exams. I've done all my RAD exams up until Solo Seal. Many of you might not know Solo Seal in the Royal Academy of Dance syllabus is, well, it used to be in the old syllabus, you had to do 7 exercises, one of which being 16 puedes en point, and another waltz dance that literally you would lose your breath afterwards because you'd be so tired. The first exercise at the Solo Seal for the RAD was actually, you had to come on stage and do an adage, and the first thing you had to do was a ponche. So I've really taught myself how to deal with nerves, and in also just being in situations where you know you want to do your best. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way. So I'm going to give you my top tips to how to prepare for exams and competitions to make sure that on your special day that you can obviously deliver the performance that you imagine. Also, these tips sort of vary. Some are what you should do on the day of, and some are leading up to the competition and exams. So basically, I wanted to give you a bit of a mixture. Now, my first tip is that a good warm-up is absolutely crucial. I actually feel like this is a make or break when it comes to having a good performance or a good exam. I used to have so many different techniques that I would use before performance and exam. So I wanted to get your comments and feedback if you wanted me to release a pre-performance warm-up. So basically a typical warm-up that I used to do before an exam or before an important performance with the Royal Ballet. I would love to be able to show you what I used to do and the things that I used to think about when it came to warming up. Also, I think it'd be really cool to do one that's almost like a follow along. So I'll teach it to one of my dancers and they can basically demonstrate it and I can sort of briefly correct it, but at least then you'd be able to follow along. So if you did have a performance or exam coming up, you could click onto my video and there we go. I can give you a good warm up. Let me know if you want it because I'm really keen to do it. So the first thing that I would always do was I would never ever try pirouette before I had that particular performance or exam. I know that sounds crazy, but it was just something that I always made sure I didn't do because I think it's easy to get into this headspace when you try pirouette, or if one thing doesn't work that you know that you're about to do when you go on stage, it's so easy for it to muddle all of this, and you just want to make sure that when you go on you have a clear, open mind. And I would always put such an importance on balances. So before you go on stage and before you have an exam, my whole warm-up was based around balancing. So after every single pre-performance warm-up, I would have a balance of some sort, whether it was in my performance or exam that I was about to do or whether it wasn't, because being on my leg was my #1 priority. So I would balance in every single position, in attitude, in petit retire, in full retire. I would just make sure that I did a balance in every single possible classical pose to make sure that I knew that my center was with me before I stepped on stage. Okay, my tip number 2 is really important. It is what you eat and when you eat before you perform, because I felt like I needed to still feel that there was food in my belly and I had that fuel there for me to last a 3-hour performance or an hour exam. So I have one crazy thing that I always used to do before I performed or before my exams. I had to eat white rice. Well, my teacher basically, she told me that white rice, it activates your brain and it sort of makes it more alert. So from that day on, when I was about 14, I literally always had white rice before every single exam, performance, and I tell you what, it always worked. So as I said, I like to almost feel that there's always food in my tummy, and then I know that that fuel's there, that's gonna last me throughout a 3-hour performance. So for me, having rice and having the carbs or an hour or 2 hours before an exam or show was my ideal situation, and it had to be white rice. And I'll never forget this story. So I went to YAGP on behalf of the Royal Ballet School back in 2010. And it was the day of our selection before you got selected for the finals. So it was a really important day. You had to obviously perform your solo and then they'd select you. So I was there, and obviously in a very high pressure situation. But for some reason, Mum could not find rice anywhere. Like, it was impossible for us to get boiled rice. It was honestly like the biggest search. And I'll never forget, my mum and my ballet teacher, they were together running around New York trying to find just boiled rice for me before I had this performance, and it was hilarious. I ended up finding it, but basically it was just something that I always had to have. I used to love it, and it always used to work for me. It was worth it because that performance was one of my favorites. But that's just a little something that I used to always do. So you can try it too and see if it works as well. And everybody's different, but having the right food before you perform is really important because you need to have the right energies for that particular show or exam. So just remember that, put a really big importance on that. Now, tip number 3. Don't know if anyone thinks the same as me when it comes to this, but having the right shoes. Whew. So that's another deal breaker. I had to have the right shoes before I went into an exam or performance. And it would come down actually to weeks before the exam or performance. I would actually break in shoes, put them aside and save them until all that show, performance or exam or whatever it was that I had coming up that I knew I had to be good for. When you're wearing shoes that you're not fully comfortable in or something's not quite right, it really can change your balance and change your turns. So a tip for you all, definitely break in your shoes weeks or even a month before. Put them aside, maybe put them on the day before just so you can sort of remind yourself and what they felt like, but definitely just make sure you have your shoes prepared because there's nothing worse than getting to an exam or performance and feeling like that you haven't got the right tools. My tip number 4 is you obviously want to feel your best. So with a lot of roles that I had done with the Royal Ballet, I knew that I had to look my best and feel my best, and half of it was if I felt good, then I'd usually find I'd have a much better exam or performance. So what I'd actually do about 2 weeks leading up to whatever performance or exam it was, I was a big fan of the cross trainer. I know when it comes to preparing and getting your stamina fully up and ready before you have a performance, everyone's different. So some people might find that a bike works, some people might find that rowing exercises work, some people might find that just running works, or some people find that even just running your dance twice works. But for me, I had to do an exercise that was totally different to ballet to build up my stamina. So I would actually always do cross trainer. Make sure I link a photo of it right above. I'd start off just normal, sort of general pace, you know, for 2 minutes to warm up and get my heart rate going. Then I would go a minute, crazy, like as fast as I could possibly go. Then I'd go back to 2 minutes rest, and I'd basically repeat that 8 times. So by the end, literally, I remember turning blue. So I remember being so puffed and tired, but for me that was the best way for me to feel my best 2 weeks before a performance, because I knew that I had the stamina to go out there and do my best. When you're on stage leading up to a performance, seriously, you lose so much energy, as in you're warming up before your show, and this is why the warm-up's important. That's why I want to release a video on that. So you've got the warm-up, you've got hair and makeup, which that can tire you out too, just from the stress of trying to make everything look perfect. Then you don't realize it, but before you go on stage, you do your warm up, but when you're side stage, you actually end up doing a lot as well. So you're actually wasting a lot of energy. So stamina is so important, because I always think of it as this: if you've got 100% in your tank before you start, right, and by the time you've done hair and makeup, your performance warm up, then your side stage, you'll probably actually go on stage with 50% energy. So if you've got that extra stamina, obviously it means you're going to be able to sustain and perform better in the exam or performance if you have that extra gas in the tank. So tip number, I think it's number 5. Tip number 5, hopefully I'm right. And this tip is about your preparation. I always say, as soon as you get into the studio, you literally have to give it your all when you're preparing for an exam or competition. A lot of dancers these days, they try and just conserve energy until, you know, the day before. And I mean, by conserving energy, I mean maybe when they get into rehearsal mode, they don't actually know their capabilities and how far they actually can push themselves. So I always say the preparation is so important. You've got to make sure that every rehearsal you go into, you are giving 150 zillion%, because if you give that in every single rehearsal, you can imagine how much better it's actually going to be. So I call it conserving energy, and I see it a lot, but you've really just got to make sure that you don't conserve your energy, because what are you holding back for? You want to be your strongest, you want to be able to perform your best when it comes to those high pressure situations. So you've really just got to push yourself to the extremities, and if you don't know your capabilities, find them out. You've got to work out what you need to do for you so that you can completely push yourself when it comes to these scenarios. Having a good coach, having a good mentor, having a good teacher, all that helps you prepare. And I can definitely say that when I coach dancers leading up to a competition, it's not even just physically pushing yourself, it's mentally. So I always try and make sure I push dancers to the limit to make sure that they know how far they can actually go. Because basically, I've really learned from this situation before. I've prepared for many competitions, and there's been times where I felt like I haven't actually given maybe my 150 zillion% that I needed to give. Then when it actually comes to the performance or show, then when things don't go right or don't get selected for the next round, or I don't get the mark that I wanted in my exam, then I have to sit there and say to myself, I could have actually done more. And that's the worst. If you actually give every single little ounce of you that you have, when you get the result that you maybe didn't expect, or if you don't get to the next round, or if a performance doesn't go quite your way, it's easy to cope with it, because you can at least say to yourself, I gave my all leading up to this, and I know I couldn't have done anything more to help prepare myself. Make sure in these situations you're always giving your all for your teacher or your coach or your mentor, because it pays off. And when you do, so if you do then get to the next round, or if you do get an amazing exam result, then say to yourself, hard work pays off, and I worked so hard to get that result, and you'll be really happy with yourself. So I think that's probably one of the most important things when it comes to performing and leading up to an exam or performance. Now, my last tip number 6. This is about more so on the day of your exam or your performance or class or competition. I want to give you a little tip on standing out. Now, when it comes to dancers, there's no perfect dancer out there. You've always got to work hard for something, and that's so important. So every dancer has got their strengths and their weaknesses, and the most important thing here is that you've got to work out what yours are. So if you know that your strengths are turning and jumping, and maybe your weakness is adage, what you've got to learn is when you go to these classes and exams, you have to really highlight your strengths and learn to cover up the weaknesses, and also just try and make sure the gap between your strengths and your weaknesses is like this, not like that. So my view is no dancer has every single thing. I don't think I've ever come across a dancer that's got the legs, the feet, the body, the face, and the heart. You know, sometimes if dancers have all the facility, they might not have the heart for it. Some dancers have the heart for it, and they might not have as much facility. So it's really important that you understand your strengths and weaknesses before you step into these really high pressure situations, because then you'll know how to handle and show off your assets. So it's really important. Now dancers, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and learned a couple of things. I know it was sort of brief and I sort of touched over those subjects, but I just wanted to give you a bit of an insight and my view on these topics, because I have been through a lot of these situations, and for me those 6 tips were the things that I knew I had to remember, otherwise I maybe wouldn't get the result that I wanted. I hope leading up to your next competition or exam that this video has helped, and even if it helps one person, I'll be so happy. And thank you all so much for subscribing to my channel all the time. I love you all so much, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Don't forget to also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, it's all Claudia Dean Coaching, and I will see you in my next video with a new backdrop.